Why was Eldergrove Asylum buried under the earth? What unspeakable horrors remain trapped within its walls? And who, or what, still lurks in the shadows, waiting for those who dare to return? This is Mark's story, a historian and urban explorer who has been placed in receipt of a mysterious letter from a complete stranger. The letter includes a map and a very simple message: you must find Eldergrove Asylum. The truth is buried there. Curiosity kept Mark going along the path marked on the map deep into a remote forest. However, what Mark found was a place that was supposedly closed over 50 years ago, the long-abandoned remains of an asylum. The location of the asylum is covered with overgrowth, its entrance hid behind thick vines, and the air feels abnormally cold in the middle of summer. Obsession with forgotten history makes Mark dive into the asylum, ignoring the cautions of the village people. As soon as he enters the asylum, he notices strange symbols written on the walls, thinkable and unknown. He feels that the place itself is alive. He detects somebody following him. Describe the atmosphere of this abandoned asylum in this chapter as grimly desolate, as mustard with decay, coldness of air, and the feeling that is unnerving to feel that someone is watching you. The section must evoke tension and anxieties in the reader. Mark's investigation highlights the real history of Eldergrove Asylum and its horrible, sinister past. Built in the 1800s, the mental institution rapidly earned itself a worse reputation for the inexpressible treatments and mysterious deaths. Under the experimentation of Dr. Harold Kensington, a psychiatrist known for his morbid interest in the human mind, cruel experiments were being performed. Lobotomy, electrocution, and dark occult rituals on behalf of sick patients were just some of the rumors within the country. Believing that madness was curable by unlocking the spiritual barriers in the mind, Kensington used methods that proved brutal. Many of his patients died under suspicious circumstances. The asylum was shut down after several gruesome murders, and Kensington disappeared without a trace. As Mark burrows into history, very odd things start happening to him. He hears whispers in his ear, cold hands brush against his skin, and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures appear in his line of vision. It is unmistakable that the asylum is far from empty. Here, Mark meets the local woman, Sarah, with dark history and a secret connected with Eldergrove. Her great-grandfather was one of Dr. Kensington's patients, and she has been fascinated by this place since her childhood. Together, Mark and Sarah start to dig up secrets that should stay locked up. They dig up and collect the old patients' record files, but most of them are redacted or incomplete. The names of some patients were completely crossed out and others bear mysterious symbols that seem to be similar to the carvings in the asylum walls. Mark and Sarah conclude that Kensington did not just do medical experiments, he was looking for contact with dark powers. They discover an underground chamber beneath the asylum, where Kensington has indulged in his worst practices. The wall of the chamber is covered with various occult symbols, and the center of them is covered in blood on an altar. Mark and Sarah came to realize that Kensington was not trying to cure his patients, he was trying to summon something from the other side. Mark and Sarah enter the asylum, thereby opening doors for the captive spirits. The spirits are still the tormented souls of the patients of Kensington, chained to the asylum through dark rituals performed on them. They confront Mark and Sarah in the distorted, repulsive forms of what they once were, patients with their sunken eyes and contorted limbs, reaching out to be saved but with evil fury inside. Miriam is perhaps the most frightening spirit, a young woman Kensington lobotomized. She appears to Mark in his dreams, her voice soft and mournful, growing louder and more frantic each time. She tries to tell him to get out of the asylum before it's too late, but her words are drowned out by the deafening whispers of the other spirits. Mark also starts losing grip over reality. In fact, he does have some terrible nightmares that torment him with images of being strapped to a gurney in the asylum, where Kensington is conducting experiments on him. The lines between dream and reality start blur, and Mark begins seeing ghosts even in his wakefulness. As the haunting intensifies, Mark and Sarah come to realize that they are dealing with something much more sinister than just restless spirits. The dark force that Kensington tried to call up awakens, using the spirits as vessels to escape the asylum. Objects appear to move of their own accord, doors slam shut on their own, and the very walls throb with an unearthly power. Mark and Sarah end up stuck in the asylum only to become lost when the building seems to shift and change about them. Spirits roam the hospital's halls, driven by the screams of anguish and clawing at people with bloodied hands by the patients of Kensington. When Mark and Sarah find themselves in the old office of Kensington, they discover his personal journal, showing how he writes about his descent into madness, detailing dark rituals he performed and the entity he tried to summon. He did believe that unlocking the mind could unlock a gateway to another dimension, but unleashed a malevolent force that consumed him and his patients instead. Mark and Sarah knew that the way out of this asylum only lay in front of them by facing the entity that Kensington called forth to his presence. The entity was known only as the Whisperer, feeds on the fear and suffering of the living. The soul it consumed continued growing in power. Thus, it needed more than its confinement in the asylum, and its darkness spread into the world beyond it. Mark and Sarah go down into the below-ground tunnels leading to the asylum. As they descend into the tunnels, they find at the core of the asylum's darkness the chamber where Kensington had first summoned the Whisperer. Wall upon wall are splattered with blood, the air thick with deathly stench. Kensington's patients have congregated around the altar, hollow eyes of spirits focused on Mark and Sarah in full reverence. In a tense and terrifying showdown, Mark and Sarah must harness the knowledge they have gained to perform an inverse ritual that will send the Whisperer back into the dimension from whence it came. But as they begin the ritual, the Whisperer manifests himself, a grotesque, shadowy figure who speaks in the voices of Kensington's victims. The counter-ritual, on the other hand, is a very repulsive, dreadful process. The Whisperer torments Mark and Sarah using the spirits of the patients to assault them. The entity tormented them with visions of their worst fears and drove them to the edge of insanity. But with Sarah's knowledge of her great-grandfather's experience and Mark's will, they can complete the ritual. As the ritual reaches its climax, the Whisperer shrieks at the top of his lungs. And now is when the asylum begins to fall, crack by crack, earth tremor, the spirits of the patients overflow, literally, from their misery. Mark and Sarah run out of the asylum as it disintegrates, having barely escaped alive. Mark and Sarah emerge from the ruins of Eldergrove Asylum, battered and traumatized but alive. The once ghastly place was a torment beyond conception, has been reduced to rubble. The spirits have finally been freed, as well as the Whisperer, banished back to its dimension from whence it came. But just as he is walking away from the site, Mark starts hearing the familiar whisper coming on the wind, faint, haunting, and coming out calling out his name. Mark looks back, and nothing appears. And then the ending, all the more creepy, that perhaps the Whisperer wasn't gone for good. The asylum may be gone, but some horrors never truly die. As Mark and Sarah return to their lives, they are consumed by what they saw. And, far away in the shadows, the Whisperer waits for its opportunity to return. If you enjoyed this terrifying tale, like, share, and subscribe for more horror stories that will leave you awake at night.